Welcome to the Daily Gospel of John. I'm in Tennessee, and it's beautiful here. Looking at verse 45 to 52, as Jesus is speaking, it is written in the prophets, they will all be taught by God. Everyone who listens to the Father and learns from him comes to me. No one has seen the Father except the one who is from God. Only he has seen the Father. I tell you the truth, he who believes has everlasting life. I am the bread of life. Your forefathers ate the manna in the desert, yet they died. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which a man may eat and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. Then the Jews began to argue sharply among themselves, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? Ooh, good grief. Taking him literally still. Okay, well, Jesus is quoting the prophets again. He did that often, as the prophets in the Old Testament often spoke about Messiah and what he would do and who he would be. And he says it is written in the prophets, they will all be taught from God. Now, that comes from Isaiah chapter 54. That's an interesting verse that he quotes because the previous chapter is where Messiah is rejected by his own people and then becomes their sin bearer as God pours his wrath upon him and says, is the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life a guilt offering, he will see the light of life and prolong his days, which speaks of the resurrection. So here, Jesus is quoting a verse which is after the whole chapter, which speaks of that this very generation that he's speaking to is going to reject him as Messiah and have him nailed upon a cross for their very own sins. So he's quoting now, Isaiah 54 is speaking of the future glory of Zion when it is restored in the kingdom age and Israel and Zion is restored to be the kingdom above all the kingdoms on the earth. And that's not yet here, as it's obvious they're rejecting him. The other interesting thing about this very verse that he's quoting is it's only a few verses before Isaiah 55 where God is speaking and he says, come, all you are thirsty, come to the waters and come buy money, come buy food and drink without money and without cost. And he says, listen to me, eat what is good, and your soul will delight in the richest of fare. And so he's speaking obviously metaphorically of food, speaking of food for the soul. Listen, believe, come and listen and believe, and your soul will delight in the richest of fare. And here Jesus is speaking of, metaphorically speaking of his body given as bread, and these people are taking him literally. Good grief, like we're going to eat his body. No, the Bible doesn't really advocate cannibalism. He's not speaking physically of his body. Often in the Gospels, he speaks metaphorically. When he said he is the good shepherd, he didn't mean he was a literal shepherd and that we're literal sheep. When he said he is the door to the sheepfold, he didn't mean he was a literal wooden door. When he said he's the vine and we're the branches, he wasn't meaning that he's literally a vine and we're branches. Why is it that some people would then think that he's speaking like, yeah, literally, I'm going to give you hunks of my body like pieces of bread? No, he's speaking figuratively, that his body would be broken. And these people know about the Passover and how the matzah was broken in 3 pieces. And the middle piece, interestingly, Jesus crucified in the middle of the other 2. The middle piece wrapped in a white linen napkin and hidden away, to be found later and brought back out. Okay, well, that is speaking of Jesus, speaking like, my body, this bread will be broken. I will be buried in the tomb, wrapped in that linen cloth and buried, and then I will come back, be brought back to life. And so that is what he's speaking of. But they weren't getting it. And I have to come back to this thought that so often we don't get it when God is speaking to us. He's trying to reveal his heart. Unfortunately, these people were not understanding what he was saying. They're taking him, not hearing his heart, but just taking a surface approach. So I pray that for you, for me, that we would look to the God who is and ask that he would open our eyes to understand his heart and what he's calling out to give us, that spiritual food that will satisfy our souls. God bless. Thanks.